welcome to KoshienCast, the only sports anime podcast that has the sauce of faith. My name is Matt, and joining me today is a very special guest. It's Matt.
Hello.
Alright, so this is the ninth week of the spring anime season, and despite my inability to pronounce week, I am confident that we will be covering every sports anime that aired between May 28th and June 3rd. I have one quick announcement up front. So, Matt, you will not be joining us for the Tiger Mask portion of this podcast once again.
Yes, that is correct. I will be at ColossalCon for several days, so I will be living it up at a water park. Probably for most of it, I would say. That is, largely the reason I am going.
They have water parks in Indiana, right?
I don't care.
Okay. And once again, of course, when Matt says he will be going, by the time you hear this, he means he will have already gone.
I will have already been refreshed and come back home, yes, and having edited the episode.
Okay, great. So we'll just do the other three shows first, and then I will tackle Tiger Mask on my own at the end. But in the meantime, Matt, would you be so good as to dive into Yowamushi Pedal?
Okay, cool. So this week we are covering episode 21 of Yowamushi Pedal. So not a whole lot going on in this episode. Everybody is dealing with the knowledge that Kaburagi lost his race with Dobashi. Hakone therefore gets to lead the pack now as opposed to Sohoku because they are no longer the champions. And therefore there is a lot of back and forth between Teshima and Izumida, and also Naruko and Izumida are opening alluded to the Sauce of Faith during that time where they're just trying to kind of get in each other's heads. Kaburagi is very dismayed over how he lost his race, and then as he's riding along, he does run in. Donchiku is there to kind of support him and give him a nice little high five to kind of pick back up his spirits, along with Sugimoto and Koga are there. Pretty much the entire rest of the Yowamushi team, or the Sohoku team, is there. The episode ends with Hakone. Apparently, their grand evil plan to separate Onoda from the entire rest of the group by while they are sprinting to slowly decelerate their pace so that the pack would have enough time to catch up, and therefore Onoda gets absorbed into the main pack, and then they sprint on ahead with and then the rest of the pack is determined to keep Onoda from actually escaping from it.
Right.
Yeah, so not really much going on here.
Well, right, so we watched this episode together, and we sort of had to stop afterwards and take stock and think about what actually occurred. Like, what changed from beginning to end? What changed? Because the pace was pretty slow. There was a lot of repetition. It felt like the bulk of the episode was just Sohoku and Hakone riding next to each other and, bragging about themselves.
Right. Yeah, you really could have cut out a lot of this episode, like the whole reunion of Dobashi with the rest of the team, or with the rest of his team.
Exactly, because Dobashi just sits there and he's like, let me describe how I beat Sohoku. And the audience is like, we were there,
Yeah, we saw that.
It's not news.
And then it's like, I kind of figured this was going to be the twist that the series was going to take with Kaburagi, with where he has his big realization that he was riding with the hopes of everybody else on the team on his back, and that's why he didn't take that seriously enough.
Oh, so that's why he lost, because he didn't believe in his team?
Yeah, essentially. He didn't believe in the He didn't realize how much was at stake by his losing, even though there's not really that much, really. Mm-hmm. No, they don't get to lead the pack anymore, but, they're still pretty firmly up there.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I don't know. It's not really making the connections there very well.
Yeah, it's also odd. I mean, again, they're just trying to reemphasize how freaking dumb Kaburagi is, that he literally never considered the fact that the people that he prevented from being on the team want him to succeed in their place.
Right.
Like, the fact that thought would never have crossed his mind is a little odd.
That part I don't actually mind so much. I do think this is character development that Kaburagi has kind of needed for a while.
Fair enough.
I do think that they have taken this in about the most standard, boring direction possible.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just because it's like, oh, I get it, I have to race for my teammates. Yeah, that's kind of the realization that every single character has already had.
Yeah.
Like, your arc is not really all that different from Amaizumi's last season. So...
Yeah, I kind of wish one of these boys would just be a jerk.
Yeah, a little bit. Like, I almost would appreciate it more if Kaburagi was, like, if this was the moment that separated Kaburagi from the group. Like, no,
that
like...
he's actually selfish.
Yeah, exactly. Like, oh, well, I lost that, no big deal. And everybody else is like, what? Yeah. Dude, like, no, you ride with the team. He's like, I don't care.
Yeah, I'm here to win, or whatever, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, that would actually be an interesting dynamic, but they're not really going for that.
They're not going for interesting. They're going for husbando or whatever.
Yeah, and I think that's also kind of the problem, is that you're kind of just trying to create a... Like, that's kind of what this series kind of feels to me right now. It feels like they're trying to create new characters, specifically for the intent of having new pairings so that they can sell merchandise.
Yeah, just more people that fit more niches and more archetypes so that everybody can have a favorite.
Right, and it's like, because you got that already with Kaburagi and Donchiku, like, they're the most obvious example. You also have this strange connection between Amaizumi and Sugimoto. Mm-hmm. Now you've suddenly decided to make Koga a big character, and he has this big rivalry with Teshima.
Right.
And it's like, I guess, but it's like, it feels very cynically made in that regard.
Yeah. What do you think of this big strategy from Hakone at the end?
Oh, it makes no sense.
Well, I mean, so there's two levels of it for me. So effectively what happens is Hakone and Sahoku sprint ahead, separate from the pack, but then Hakone lets the pack catch back up with them so that both teams can get reabsorbed by the pack. So the pack is all aggressive. They're like, oh, finally, we caught up to the leaders. Look, we're so fast, we're so strong, we're going to hold them back. And they do that, and they absorb both teams. But in doing so, Onoda somehow gets pulled much further back, and he gets completely separated from Sahoku, whereas all of Hakone stays together, and all the rest of Sahoku stays together. So what works for me with that is that probably if I was... someone in the pack, I wouldn't want to give the reigning champion a way. I would probably want to block his advance so that he couldn't conquer the mountain and win the day. But I don't know how he got separated. That's the thing that's not clear.
Right.
And how could Hakone possibly predict that Onoda and only Onoda would be separated from his team?
Right. That's kind of my complaint with this. Like, that's why I'm kind of saying it doesn't really make any sense, because they got absorbed in there too. They could have just as easily have been like, oh shoot, we got both teams in here. This is our moment. Make sure none of them pass. But for some reason, they're also very fixated on Onoda.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, I do get that, because he is the reigning champion, technically. Like, so I can kind of understand that, but it's like, they couldn't have possibly realized, like, no matter what they say, there's no feasible way that they could have realized that the pack would have specifically decided to pick on Onoda.
Well, yeah, and they couldn't have picked on Onoda if he hadn't been separated from his team. So why would they know that he would be in the back or on the side at that specific moment, and then would be easy for the pack to separate from the rest of Sahoku? Like, you can't plan for that.
Yeah, exactly. Like, this is just such a, like... on one hand, I almost appreciate it, just because, like, this is actually, like, a strategy at the very least. It's kind of a... It's at least something. It's more planning than what we normally get in Yowamushi Pedal. Which
usually the plan is, I'm going to sprint faster.
Yeah. I'm going to sprint faster with more passion on my side.
Yeah.
So on one hand, I can appreciate that, but yeah, it's just not very well thought out. But, this is also supposed to be kind of that moment where they're like, no, Hakone got us. Like, they really got us. Mm-hmm. It's like, not really. I mean, they did, but they really shouldn't have, I guess.
Right. I mean, it was more like random chance got us, than Hakone.
Yeah, it was basically like not even like a controlled risk. It was just kind of a stupid risk.
Yeah, it was a shot in the dark.
Yeah, basically.
So before we move on, would you like to share your theory about how the Interhigh is going to end?
Oh, okay. So I just want to throw out real quick. I have not read the manga. I have no idea if this is how it's going to end. But the way I'm kind of... So the way that this is going is that this is shaping up to be an inverse of the last Interhigh. So, because the first time they had the two people going out to race against Izumida. They had Tadokoro and Naruko going out to race him. And then Tadokoro is the one who ends up winning. In this time, it's the inverse. They have the experienced character in Aoyagi being the one who's struggling to keep up.
Right.
And so they send out the inexperienced one, Kaburagi. And Kaburagi actually loses. So now, this year, it's Hakone is the one who wins the sprint. So the way I'm seeing this play out is that effectively it's going to end in pretty much the exact same way that the Interhigh did last year, where Onoda and Minami are going to have to race up the mountain again. Mm-hmm. Except this time Minami is going to be the one that wins, and that way when we get to the third year, that means that they are both 1 for 1.
Well, they both won one, they both lost one. You mean?
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, they both got 1 victory to their names. So then, therefore, it's best 2 out of 3. So
yeah, and then that'll be the big plot. Is they're both going to be like the captains of their teams, and they're going to be like, this year I'm going to be the champ, and I'll show you who's the real champion.
Right, exactly. Yeah. And so it's like, when we finally get that final season of Yowamushi Pedal in like 2022 or something like that.
Right.
We'll finally get to see that final destined showdown.
With everyone's favorite characters who are fully fleshed out and we all care about. Minami.
Basically, it's like those two, say what you will about Minami, but he was a pretty significant portion of the last couple seasons of Yowamushi Pedal. And here it's just like, he's kind of around, but he really has not done much.
No, he's a total afterthought. But You're right, they will definitely make him,
Oh, yeah.
Anyway.
At the very least, they have to give Minami a win over Onoda. Anyway, I think we both vowed to not spend this episode sighing over Yowamushi Pedal constantly, and I think
Too late.
Yeah, yeah, basically. So, do you want to move on to Big Wind-Up?
Yeah, I'd love to.
Fantastic.
So this is Big Wind-Up, episode 10. Most of this episode is a flashback where Abe is reminiscing about his time playing with Haruna. So Haruna was a second year on their junior high team when Abe started as a first year. Abe was assigned to be his catcher, and he had a really tough time because Haruna threw harder than anyone he'd ever caught before. He got injured a lot just trying to keep up with Haruna's pace. But he still believed they could do something constructive. Eventually he got burned out with Haruna, however, because Haruna insisted on only pitching 80 pitches. Haruna didn't give max effort in games that he decided did not matter. And he would walk off the mound in critical situations if he'd hit his limit. So he tells Mahashi that, that's really what makes the difference for him, is that Mahashi stays on the mound, and Haruna is happy to give up the mound because his goal is the major leagues, not winning the game he's playing in that moment. Separately, Haruna managed to win the game that they were watching. So Musashino came back, and he tried after the game to track down Abe because he said he had something to tell him, but he didn't specify what that was. And he separately reminisced how Abe was really cocky back in the day, and how frustrated it made him that Abe told everyone that he was the worst pitcher.
Right. So yeah, this was a good episode just on the basis of how it... First of all, what it did was it kind of resolved some of the complaints I might have had with some of the characters complaining, you know, like how they were like, oh, you know, he's just thinking about a career, you know, he's thinking about his long-term health and not helping out the team.
Right.
I think this episode did a really good job of showing, okay, this was not just a kid who was trying to protect himself. This was somebody who was very clearly, like, not a member of the team because of it. Like, I think Abe had the best way of describing it. It's like, it doesn't, like... I understand if he was trying to protect his future, but this was somebody who, when it was down, like when we were down and out, like this guy would simply not pitch. Like if he had hit his pitch limit, like, you know, I understand like wanting to stay like at a rough number around that, but you know, if we are totally down, like it doesn't matter to him. Like he wouldn't even throw like even one extra pitch beyond that just to even wrap up the game.
Right.
And so it's like, okay, I can at least understand where that frustration of Abe's would come from. And then the other thing I liked about it as well is that it made Haruna's... It also sort of fleshed out Haruna in a way that's kind of unexpected, because it seems like he's a very different person now.
Yeah, and that was clear when he was talking with his team. They sort of realized... Well, Haruna was talking with Musashino. They were like, oh, you know, part of the reason that Abe hated Haruna was probably that back when he was in junior high, he had a real attitude problem, and he didn't really listen to anyone else. He was a lot more arrogant and difficult to be around, and they all knew this. They knew him at the time, and they're saying, like, oh, well, yeah, of course people thought he was the worst, because he was the worst back then. He was impossible to be around.
Right.
But now that, you know, ever since he got to our teams, ever since he got to high school, he's really chilled out, and he's become a different person.
Right.
But Abe's never had the opportunity to talk to him outside of, you know, those tough experiences in junior high.
Right. And it doesn't really help that Haruna's personality has not really changed that much, because, you know, he's still calling him an idiot and being like, hey, jerkwad, I need to talk to you later.
Right. Right.
But he still is effectively the same person, but, you know, he still has managed to mellow out and is still willing to occasionally use his full strength.
Right.
Which we get to see in this episode. And I think that's a great way to set up a future conflict between the two, because we really don't know what to expect from Haruna now. In fact, like, I don't even know if they, like, if their next game is not against that team, at the very least, it does set up an interesting plot thread for later.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, one other thing I'd like to point out as well, we don't talk about it much. I do, like, but in addition to all the character drama and everything, the Big Wind-Up also has a really great sense of comedic timing.
Yeah. Yeah.
I got a good laugh out of, after Abe is done telling his story, their other teammate is like, hey, do you mind if I tell the rest of the team? And the rest of the team is just sort of like, is quietly, sort of like stunned to themselves, like, crap. Like, because they were all listening.
Yeah, exactly. Like, yeah, if he did mind, or if you didn't want them to tell the rest of the team, that they were all quickly realized, like, oh no, should we not have been listening? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
It's very high school.
Also kind of like, yeah, you guys were not exactly being quiet about this.
Yeah, exactly.
So, yeah, you know, it's one of those things where it doesn't let itself get too wrapped up in the drama.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting, too, because, you know, we still sort of have the two arguments unresolved between Abe's point of view and Haruna's. And what I like about the end of the episode is Haruna is complaining about Abe, and it's unclear as to whether he misses him, or he respects him, or he legitimately is upset with him.
Right.
Because it seems like on some level he thought that they had an understanding. And he's heard that ever since he left the team that Abe's been going around and telling everyone that Haruna is the worst pitcher. And it seems like on some level he's just hurt by it, and he's confused, and he's like, well, what are you talking about? I thought we were a battery. Why would you say that behind my back?
Right. And, it kind of shows that there is kind of a second side to the story. Yeah, and maybe Haruno was acting like a jerk, but, maybe Abe wasn't exactly... this was somebody who was trying to think about his future, mm-hmm. Like one of the scene that they depict where Abe really lost it with Haruno was when they were down like several points.
Runs.
And sorry. Yeah, they were down several runs, and he just refuses to pitch at this point because he's at his pitch limit, and it's like it's the bottom of the ninth. Bases are loaded, and Haruno just walks off the mound, just same as always.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, on one hand, I get why he's so frustrated because, had Haruno really tried this entire game, they probably could have pulled something off. But at the same time, it's like, you do have to understand, Abe, that this was pretty much a hopeless situation. You really can't expect him to really, you really can't expect him to, have, the same level of passion for this that you do,
Well, right, and the other factor here is that in that year, Haruno himself was coming off an injury. So he is constantly thinking about it being, aggravating that injury again. Because, and hopefully that's something we see. Again, I forget all of it. But hopefully that's something we see where how did he get injured the first time? And how much of this personality quirk, or whatever you want to call it, is a result of him being terrified of hurting himself again and having to go through that again.
Right, exactly.
And the fact that Abe has absolutely no sympathy for that and refuses to talk about it. I mean, both of them are sort of arrogant in their own way, but the fact that Abe feels so slighted and is totally willing to talk behind his back without ever confronting him.
Right.
It's not like Abe comes off looking super great.
Yeah, exactly. Abe is still just a high school student. He is still he's still really only seeing things from his own perspective at this point.
Right.
And, it is kind of a moment for him to be able to grow and sort of make peace for Haruno down the line.
Yeah.
It'll be kind of a defining moment for Abe. It may also end up being a defining moment for Mihashi because, the reason why he and Abe and Mihashi actually kind of work out so well is because because now Abe is the one who gets to play the dominant role now.
Right. And Mihashi doesn't have to worry as much about coming off the mound because Mihashi doesn't throw as hard. So, one of the biggest single factors for pitcher injuries in baseball is velocity. So the harder you pitch oftentimes is an indicator of the likelihood that you're going to injure yourself, which, makes sense. That's the more force that you're applying to your arm, the more likely it is to have trouble down the road. But because Mihashi is such a soft tosser and he's a control pitcher, he actually can pitch longer and can pitch without as much risk as someone like Haruno.
Right.
So it's a little easier for him to just stay on the mound than it is for Haruno, who has to be very conscious about how he's using his body.
Right. And so in a way, it does kind of show that why Mihashi and Abe do make a better pair, even if both Haruno and Abe may have been wrong in that situation to an extent. It does show at the very least that, this was also a pairing that was always going to be toxic regardless.
Right. No, I agree. It was great. I really want to see more of Haruno. Honestly, at this point, I think he's the most interesting character in the show to me.
Oh yeah, definitely. At the very least, what his character entails for the series.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, it starts a conversation that is. It's an interesting one for me personally, but it's one that you don't see often enough in sports anime anyway.
Right, because so often, you basically get one side of the argument.
Right.
And generally from the hero side, and, you see why the hero was, always 100% the right. Maybe maybe he comes off sympathetic at first, and then something happens along the way, where it's like, no, that's kind of their moment of no return. But it's like, no, we don't have that in Big Wind-Up. Everybody is just kind of human.
Yeah, I agree. You want to move on to another show about humans?
Yeah, sure. Let's talk about Encouragement of Climb.
That's exactly the one I was thinking of. It could have been so many shows.
Man, I don't know how I would have figured that one out.
All right.
Okay, so both of these episodes are about the climb up Mount Fuji. Episode 9 is kind of the fun time up Mount Fuji. They learn that they can get some wooden walking sticks so that they can get branded along the way to kind of show their progress. It makes a nice little item, to kind of take home with you, like a nice little trinket. And they learn about how there are so many different rest stops along the way, and that the higher you go, the shorter there is distance between the rest stops. But also how, that's because it's going to keep getting steeper and steeper. They're walking along, they're having fun, they end up getting they get food at the base as well, so that they can, and they kind of, experiment with, the food there, all their different delicacies, even though they seem to just be different, they basically tend to be normal dishes, just with fancier names. And then at the very end of that episode, we kind of start seeing Aoi sort of starting to fade a little bit because she didn't get much sleep the prior night. And then the next episode is largely about Aoi's altitude sickness. Right. Because she didn't get enough rest, and she's doing a lot of very exhausting work. And as she is seriously getting lightheaded, she is just about to pass out. She can barely understand what anybody is saying. So Kaede decides to stay with Aoi while Hinata and Kokona continue to climb up the mountain. They stop at the 8th rest stop, and then they basically just stop so Aoi can sleep. Hinata and Kokona continue to climb. And then they get to see the Milky Way at night because there's very little light up there. Aoi manages to wake up in time, and so they're all kind of looking at the Milky Way together. The episode ends with Aoi sleeping in her sleeping bag and kind of complaining about how she wants to go back home.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I enjoyed both of these episodes a lot. I felt like they had a lot more depth than... the show, and the show doesn't need to have depth because it's not necessarily built to always be, a very serious show. But what I liked most, and I'm just sort of treating them both combined, was Aoi feeling so insufficient. Why is it that everyone else can do this but me? And despite that fact, Kaede sticking by her and saying, it's okay. It's not your fault. This is just something that's happening to you. You're going to risk hurting yourself if you go further. You can do this again. Don't worry about it. And I appreciate the fact that she actually has to go through that instead of everything just being, straightforward and simple.
Right, yeah, exactly. And not only that, but the episode still ends sort of with kind of in a... okay, I'm not going to say, a dark place, because, this isn't a dark show.
Right, but a negative place.
A negative tone, because she's like, I am legitimately miserable right now, and I regret doing this.
Yeah, she's like, I just want to go home. Why did I do this? I'm embarrassed, I'm exhausted, I'm sick. This is stupid.
Right, I want to go back to my own bed.
Right.
And it's I appreciate the fact that they're willing to, you're not always going to have fun doing this. There are legitimate risks to, even for as controlled a path as as this path that they're taking on Mount Fuji is, there are still risks to it. And, you do need to be prepared for it. It's not just, a fun little stroll up a hill.
Yeah, exactly. But I did like sort of Kaede's leadership, I'll say, in saying, okay, we don't all need to stay here. Kokona and Hinata, you should go ahead because this is still something you can do. This is still something you can enjoy. And Aoi not going isn't going to make it any less worth it. It's still something you ought to do. But Kaede saying, hey, I'm the one who has the experience. I'm the one who's been through this before, and I'm gonna just support Aoi.
Right.
And so I liked the fact that sort of the two groups showed two different visions of friendship, where Hinata and Kokona, they were being Aoi's friend by saying, like, okay, we're going to do this for you. Like, I know you can't do this, but we don't want you to feel bad about making us all go home, so we're going to do it on your behalf. And Kaede showing another version of friendship is saying, like, I'm going to make sure that you're safe. I'm going to make sure that you're healthy.
Right. It kind of, like, one of our complaints that we had a little earlier on that was that Kaede felt a little forced into the group without much of a role.
Right.
Without much of a bond, I guess.
Exactly, yeah. I mean, we were like, why is this girl hanging out with these dorks, basically?
Right. And there still is kind of an element to that.
Yeah.
But at the very least, it's like, okay, this is actually starting to feel like a more natural group now. Mm-hmm. Like, they are starting to feel more and more like an actual group of friends. Mm-hmm. Because Kaede is willing to take that time to, like, set us, like, okay, I'm going to stay with Aoi now, you two go on ahead.
Yeah.
Everybody kind of has a different goal in mind as well. Like, everybody has something that they're doing here. One thing I did want to bring up as well was that this series is a bit of an ad. Like, all these types of shows do have, like, that element of being an ad.
Mm-hmm.
But what I will say about this is that, you know what? It's also it's not a bad ad.
Yeah,
like,
it's pretty convincing.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, I'm watching this and I'm like, oh, that does seem like it would be a lovely time.
Exactly. And it's not... What I like is that a lot of these shows, especially the ones that are targeted on a female cast, they try and present how it's not that hard.
Right.
And that's part of the appeal, like, with Minami Kamakura, I'm just going to leave it at that. With Minami Kamakura, they often tried to present how biking isn't really that hard, so just get out and do it.
Right.
And that's one approach, but I like this approach a little better, where it's saying, oh no, mountain climbing's very hard. It's worth it, but it's very unpleasant.
Right. And I do like that they're also willing, but it's like Mount Fuji. It's like, oh, so there's this to do on Mount Fuji, huh? So it's like, on one hand, it almost presents it at first like it's a tourist trap,
right?
But then it's that second episode that kind of brings it back around. It's like, okay, yes, there are some kind of silly touristy things to do there, yes, but this is still an experience in its own right. This is still something that requires effort on your end. But one other thing I did want to bring up, this series perhaps has some of the most convincing Japanese-speaking English I think I've heard.
Well, yeah, I was going to bring that up too. They have a couple Americans show up in the episode, and they talk English the whole time. They have two characters. It's a guy and a girl. It's clear to me that the male voice actor for that, he is either American or he's a Japanese guy who lived in the United States for a significant amount of time, because he legitimately does not have an accent.
Yeah, definitely. And, like, I think I heard, like, towards the last time that they showed up, they started breaking into accent just a little bit.
Well, the female definitely did. So the female character definitely seemed like a Japanese woman who learned English, but very clearly has a Japanese accent. But the guy was pretty convincing.
Yeah, definitely. Like, I had, like, when they first showed up, I was actually thinking to myself, did they actually get, like, English speakers to do this?
Yeah. And at least one of them might have been. I have to say, though, that the dialogue... most of the dialogue was fine, because it was just snippets. Like, earlier on, they had him pass by, and the dude said, "Oh man, that sushi was good last night." And you're like, alright, that's probably what an American would say. Just still be talking about food. But at one point, they're in the same hostel area as Aoi and Kokona, and it's like midnight, and the Americans, of course, are being rowdy and talking while Aoi's trying to sleep.
Right.
And their conversation, I didn't write it down, but it goes something like the male character, the male American character says, like, do you remember when she told you to do that thing? And the girl's like, oh no, I couldn't. He's like, yeah, but like when she told you to do that thing, I mean, you have to.
It's like, okay, guys, like, I mean, I get simple sentences here, but I mean,
yeah, it's out of context, or really in context.
It's
Who says
silly.
That? It's pretty funny. It's a winner.
Right. Definitely. But yeah, a pretty solid group of episodes all around. I legitimately, it's like, I am kind of past the point of being like, oh, you know, it's good for what it is.
Yeah,
but
no,
it's like,
I think it's a good show.
Yeah, I just think it's a legitimately good show now. Like, it's a fun watch.
Yeah, and I am honestly excited and interested to see where it's going to go next week.
Right? Like, I'm probably still more excited about Big Windup, but
yes.
Yeah, I'm like pretty excited just because it's like I don't know where this is gonna go.
Mm-hmm. No, I agree. It's good stuff. It was a good week overall. 2 out of 3 ain't bad.
It's almost always 2 out of 3 though.
Yeah. So I mean, I guess I'll have to see in a couple days how Tiger Mask is,
right.
And so I guess we can just turn this over to me from the future to discuss Tiger Mask. All right, and just like that, we are in the future. And it's been a few days since I recorded the first part of this episode with Matt, but I've had the opportunity to watch Tiger Mask in his absence. He is in Ohio at ColossalCon, so if you happened to be there and heard someone that sounded like Matt, it was probably Matt. But by the time you figured that out, it's all over, so you missed your chance. I'm sorry. But you did not miss your chance to hear about Tiger Mask episode 34. So GWM announces that they are going to progress into the final phase of Final Wars. I guess their win-loss record between NJPW and GWM is tied, so they're going to have one final match, which is actually 5 matches. They have 5-man teams on each side, so Miracle 1, Miracle 2, Tiger the Black, Big Tiger the Second, and Tiger the Great the Third are going to fight Tiger Mask, Makabe, Tanahashi, Okada, aka Rainmaker, and Naito. Of course, one of the issues is that Naito is in Mexico. They asked him to come back for the match, and he said he would, but then he didn't. So they actually only have 4 people show up for the beginning of the match. Before the match, Takuma and Naoto are training, and Ruri goes with Takuma, of course. Haruna confronts Ruri and asks her if she, do you like Takuma? And they all get very flustered, and they talk about who they like, what boys they like, and everyone's like, oh, I don't like anybody. Until later in the episode when Ryu finally gets up the gumption to be serious and ask Haruna out on a date, and she says that she can't because she has a crush on someone else. Ryu figures out that someone else is Tiger Mask, and Haruna says she can't go out with Ryu because Tiger Mask is, quote, a better man than you. So that happened. Also, while off-screen, Naoto says that he made a new killer move and maybe he'll use it. So, we'll see. I have a feeling he's going to use it. Makabe and Tiger the Black are the first match. They both fall out of the ring, and they both get disqualified because they get so caught up in the fight that they don't get back in the ring. So it's a draw, meaning they just leave them in and have them fight the second match, which is a tag team match, and Tiger the Great the Third and Okada/Rainmaker join them for the tag team, and that pretty much sets us up. One final note, because Naito never showed up, Takuma, who was just there, to watch, slipped off and was trying to talk to Naoto and convince him to let him fight. So this pretty much sets us up for the rest of the series. So this was episode 34, so we've got 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 maybe. I don't know if they'll do 38 or 39 episodes. I think it's 39, so we got 5 episodes left. We also have 4 or 5 matches left. They hinted that they might have to have a 6th match as a tiebreaker, which means they'll definitely have a 6th match as a tiebreaker. So 5 matches, 5 episodes. You can pretty much see where this is going. One thing that was, one thing that bothered me is it was a little transparent how they did the setup to get Takuma back in the ring. Because clearly they had him training. He's like, I feel like I'm at full strength, and I'm good at wrestling now, again. And all that. And separately they said, oh, well, NJPW, we have this team, and we're all of us are here, except for this one guy who's definitely totally going to show up, but then, big shocker, he doesn't show up. So, of course, that just leaves an opening for someone else to fill in. What was I thinking that whole time? Fukuwara Mask, the People's Champ, is just sitting there at the announcer's booth. Why not get him up there? He's clearly capable of going toe-to-toe with anybody in GWM. He's more likable, and it just gives more opportunity for us to figure out what all he's about. So I'll just make a brief aside because this is where I'm going, and I don't have anyone else here to order my thoughts in any other way. So Fukuwara Mask. Can we talk about Fukuwara Mask? There's been a lot of build-up for his background. There's been some hints at his relationship with Lady. He was right in front of Lady, and they didn't have any shot about any connection between them. He was talking to Mr. X, but very amicably. You'd think this would be an opportunity where Mr. X might recognize Fukuwara Mask and say, like, wait, he reminds me of that old coach we used to have. Something where we could get some build-up of the only interesting character, Fukuwara Mask. But once again, they've failed to do that. They've just left him to be the wacky commentator along the sidelines when his character arc is truly the only one we care about. So, in terms of character arcs we don't care about, we had a lot of romantic discussion this week. Haruna came out and said that she has a crush on Naoto, which, I mean, if it was implied, it wasn't implied well, and it's also kind of the least interesting thing you could do with that relationship. I think because she's been around Naoto the whole time, it feels like it's sending a message that when a girl and a guy hang out a lot, then there has to be something there, or they have to at least engage in the possibility that male-female friendship just isn't a thing. Because Haruna, her relationship to Naoto, to me, has always seemed more like brother-sister. I mean, he lives with her, and they don't interact in any way that would seem like they have a sibling-style relationship. The same goes for Takuma and Ruri. Right? So, why did Naoto give up on Ruri, even though they'd been on multiple dates before? Because she started hanging out with Takuma. Because it's her job. And again, she's actually confronted on this point, and Ruri says, like, oh, well, no, I don't have a crush on Takuma. It's just my job. But she's blushing the whole time, so it's clear that's clearly not the reason that she's helping him rehabilitate. Why would it be? So it's frustrating to sort of see this implication that, oh, well, if a girl and a guy hang out a lot, they're either dating or they're too shy to say that they're not yet dating. So that was all interesting because, again, it would have been fun to see Ryu kind of evolve as a character into having, a legitimate relationship. It might have been interesting to see Ryu and Haruna start going out because it might trigger something in Naoto where he realized, oh, I always valued Haruna, but I didn't really think of her in that way, and I kind of miss having her around. Something. They could have done anything, but like they almost always do with this show, they went right down the middle with the simplest pairings, the simplest conclusions. Kurama, the reporter, managed to show up at Tiger Mask's secret lair and then leave. But with how few episodes we have left, I don't know what that accomplished. I don't know if that'll come back in any meaningful way, other than when Takuma inevitably jumps in the ring, she'll be like, oh, he was training with Tiger Mask. That must be where he learned these new moves. And then you'll say, well, yeah, obviously, the audience saw that. Why do we need you to tell anyone that? So it was kind of... I don't expect a ton from Tiger Mask week to week. I am always pleasantly surprised when it does something I don't expect, but there really wasn't anything I didn't expect in this episode. I mean, all the previous matches between GWN and GPW clearly have no purpose. Miss X just decided that that the rivalry was going to end with this series, and so we'll just see how that goes. Inevitably, what's going to happen is they're going to have to go to that sixth match, that tiebreaker match, which is going to be a one-on-one, and either through injuries or whatever else, the only people available is going to be Tiger Mask and Tiger the Great III, and they're gonna square off, and it's just going to be like the end of the original. And we'll just sit here and ask ourselves, well, so then why didn't we just watch the original, you know? But hey, at least Big Wind-Up is still good. So that's all we got for this week on Tiger Mask. We got 5 more weeks of that show. We're sort of transitioning into the summer here at the end of this month, which is going to be exciting for both of us because we've got a much more substantial schedule of currently airing shows. Both of the currently airing shows we have now, Tiger Mask and Yowamushi Pedal, are going to be wrapping up. Some would say thankfully. And we've got 4 new shows starting in addition to our continuing coverage of Big Wind-Up, and we'll finish out Encouragement of Climb next season. So we'll remind you about all of that towards the end of June. But for now, have a great week. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you next time. Our logo design is by James Ratcliffe. The theme music is Fly High by Burnout Syndromes, covered and performed by Luke Bartka. You can follow KoshienCast on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter, and our email is koshienCast@gmail.com. Make sure to subscribe, rate, and review. We'll be back next week with the best and worst from the world of sports anime, and until then, keep training.